In Great Falls, Montana, the crews of Steel Etc. display their expertise in the precision dismantling and destruction of locomotives and rail cars. Usable parts have salvage value, and the sheared metal generates revenue as furnace scrap. One of Steel Etc.'s primary jobs involves cleaning up train derailments, both on-site and back at their main yards.
These two locomotives here were involved in a head-on collision with each other. And while the outsides of them look relatively straight and okay, the internal damage was so bad that the value of it basically was decreased to the point that they were only worth salvage at this point.
Specific items must be protected during the violent process. To tear down the locomotive without damaging the valuable parts within, the process must be careful and precise.
This is a diesel-electric locomotive. It has a diesel engine that runs a very large generator, and that, of course, requires a lot of copper wiring and non-ferrous metals, and that stuff has to be removed from the iron before we can ship to the mill.
When items need to be removed, the men go in with hand torches and wrenches to free bolts, cut wires, and set chains to lift them out. Shears slowly peel away the metal skin as cutting torches release the parts marked for salvage, carefully removing them and setting them aside.
The shear operator needs to be able to determine which items can be sheared up and which items need to be cleaned a little further. And a good shear operator can separate those two things out with that shear head. Even as big and heavy as it is, they can do very delicate work as well.
This constant shearing, exposing, and removing will keep Jeff and his crew here for more than 6 months. As a teenager, Bennett started working for salvage companies in the Northeast, and scrapping has been in his blood ever since. Today, like Jeff, each man in his crew is experienced and qualified to cover every need in the process.
Everybody on my crew is able to perform multi-functions, and the reason for that is if one man is busy or isn't here for the day, I don't have to shut my job down. So it's important to cross-train everybody so that they can run each machine, the cutting torch, and they all have a good understanding of the processes that we're going through.
Because of the extreme heft of the cars they demolish, the crews utilize the heaviest duty machines available. But sometimes success depends on human ingenuity. Moving this monstrously heavy engine presented a problem.
It actually took the combined lifting weights of both the 988 and the 962 in order to move it. That would put it in excess of 25 to 30 tons by itself.
The process will continue until these cars have been cut down and sent to their main facility in Great Falls. This Montana boneyard is the final resting place of old rail cars and machinery. The ancient equipment is transformed into valuable scrap metal using powerful, state-of-the-art shears operated by seasoned professionals. Joe Flipowitz is putting their latest acquisition through its paces.
It's the third largest in production made by Stanley Labounty. The one we have down at Livingston there is a MSD-70 Labounty. The MSD-70 will go through 2-inch thick steel versus the 7500R will go through 6-inch thick steel.
The 7500 is rapidly reducing this old rail car down to a specifically designated size for disposal.
What we call a hopper car is what we're cutting up today. It'll go through that in about an hour versus where it'd take about 8 hours with our other MSD-70 shear. We generally have to cut it down to 3 foot by 3 foot, get it into the railroad box cart or gondola cart.
Joe Flipowitz is the second generation at Steel Etc., begun by his father Jim over 40 years ago. This boneyard is a silent history of the company's successes. Even the train scrapping machines themselves are being scrapped.
All the pieces of equipment up here in the salvage yard are pretty much ready for the scrap yard because they're old and the parts are getting kind of hard to find. But with the price of scrap iron right now, we're just trying to cut them up and recycle them.
While there's not much the new Labounty shear can't handle, even the most modern of equipment is only as good as its operator.
One of our operators is Alex Flipowitz. He's been operating equipment for about 35 years. You can see what great kind of an operator he is, so he's very smooth.
Equipment of this type is expensive to purchase, maintain, and operate. Just the blades of the shear cost over $1,000 each.
Out of a blade, we can get about probably 50 hours or so, generally. When we're cutting these hopper bottom cars, they're so super thick, it just eats them alive pretty quick, and you have to replace them quite often. After so many hours, you have to go through and retrim the blades there, because if you don't, it'll just bend the steel instead and make a precision sharp cut.
Once the train cars have been transformed into pieces that can be easily transported, they head for Steel Etc's main boneyard. Here, an even more powerful machine awaits them for further reduction.
We have a Sierra 750 shear. There's only 22 of them made in the world, and it's quite the operation.
The 750 is a 120-ton monster. It can shear up to 20 tons of steel per hour with a maximum operating pressure of over 4,300 psi.
We're picking up miscellaneous railroad parts and we're loading it into the 750 shear, where it's getting ready to be sheared up into smaller 1 foot by 1 foot sizes so we can put it in the railroad gondola car.
A Cat 350 material handler loads the cut-up railcar pieces into the massive 750 for processing.
You can control the size of the metal to 1 foot by 1 foot, 3 foot by 3 foot, and so on. We generally prep it down to size so we can get more weight in the car. Once the steel is compressed, you'll hit the automatic exertion button in the cab, and at the end, it has the shears that come up and down all the way through the process until it's done, and then we reload it with scrap iron.
This process continues on, taking one denizen of the rails after another and reducing them to rubble. Ironically, their remains will ride out of this boneyard in another rail car, heading for the foundry and rebirth. But there's another rail boneyard where, instead of facing destruction, old locomotives are restored, transformed to brand new condition.